Howdy, everyone. All right, I'm going to take a little bit of a different path here real quick. I had my side rails, these side rails here for the canopy itself. I brought those up, and if you remember, I had already done some riveting on these pieces from when I had done the canopy work before. So these pieces are riveted together. Obviously, I can't do much with them. And I had already started to do a little bit of a bend when and I'll cover this again when I get to it. But this edge, this forward edge of this piece has been bent a little bit. And you're also supposed to match bend, if you will, this little ear here. There's just some work that you do that side rail slides into here, and you bend this piece and the top of that piece, so when the canopy comes through here, it can kind of roll inward and up into here, or actually it fits over top. So having done the bend on that rail piece, and I have not done anything on this piece, it makes fitting them together a little bit more difficult. So what I'm decided to do is this. I'm going to keep this seam nice and tight all the way through here. If I pull up on the canopy as if I'm going to open it, it obviously opens up a gap in this corner. You can see that there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that this seam stays closed here. And then I can take up some of the gap here if I need to with spacers like I've talked about before. And as far as this skin being on the same plane as this skin, it's just a matter of making sure that the skin is pressed down tight in relation to the hinge. So in other words, you make sure that this frame, as I've said many times, is pulled down tight in relation to the hinge, which is stationary, when you drill these holes in the flanges. So what I'm going to do is this. As I said, I'm going to make sure that this seam is tight here in the corner. Make sure that the canopy is down so that this seam is tight. I'm going to make sure that the frame that's underneath here and the skin is pushed down. And then I'm going to go ahead and mark those holes on the hinge flange. I'm going to take this off, take the skin off, and I'm going to drill those holes. And I'll just hold them with clecos. If I need to put a spacer in there to bring the skin forward, I can do that, obviously before I rivet. And I can test fit shims with clecos to see how that works. And then, of course, I can cleco those hinges and the rail together so that this won't keep moving around, which I think will help determine exactly what needs to be tweaked next. After that, since I have the skin off, as I had done before with my other skin, I'm going to put a bend in it through this diagonal, or is it this diagonal? I forget, but when you look at the frame, and I'll show this after I get the skin off, the frame has got a very definite bend in it, and it's a diagonal bend. So you've got a pretty hard diagonal bend in the frame, but the skin has no bend in it at all. And that's part of the reason why, if you look at especially these clecos here along the bottom, when you look between the skin and the frame here, see how there's a gap there? And when you actually look down through here at your clecos, you can see that the clecos are not pulling the skin tight against the frame. There's just too much tension on the skin trying to make this bend for the clecos to pull it tight. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. I'm going to introduce that diagonal bend to relieve some of the stress. And I think the last time I had done that, that vastly improved the fit through here. Another option, which I haven't done yet, which I probably will do, I'm going to introduce an ever so slight break along this entire edge. Using my roller tool, I'm going to put just an ever so slight downward break along this entire forward edge of the canopy. I think I'm going to do that. Not there yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to position this, like I said, so I can match drill or at least mark those holes on the hinge flange underneath. And then I'm going to take this off. I'm going to drill those holes. I'm going to take the skin off. I'm going to put that diagonal bend in ever so slightly on both sides. And then I'm going to bring it all back together. Cleco the hinges to the frame. Reinstall everything and just see how it fits. It should fit a little bit better at that point because a little at a time I'm introducing more and more anchor points. So that's the plan. Let me do that and then we'll come back and see if it's time to start fitting the side rails, or maybe at that point we can go ahead and start match drilling some of these other pre-punched holes. All right, a little bit of change of plans, but like I said, plenty of ways to skin a cat. So I'll talk to you here in a minute. Howdy, everyone. All right, so rather than take the frame and the skin off of the airplane to drill those holes, I decided it made more sense to leave it in place. Again, trying to keep it as real world as possible. So I kept it in place. Of course, I've got the hinges pinned. And with some help, I made sure that the skin was pushed down. The skin and the frame were pushed as low as possible. I mean, really pushing on this. Vans has you, I think in the instructions they say that you should tape it down. Again, I've seen people use straps. Be very careful when you use straps because there's no structure from the main frame that rides under here out to here where that aluminum tube is. And that aluminum tube is not very strong. So if you just haphazard run a strap through here and tighten it down, it's going to tweak everything. So you almost need to run the strap in here or just outside these clecos as close as you can get it. But even then, you don't want to tighten it down very tight because there's no structure in here. I did not want to do that, so I just used muscle power and had my helper make sure that this was pushed down nice and tight. And like I said, what that does with the hinges being pinned, when you push down, you're basically just bringing this main frame lower. And then you can match drill the flanges on the hinges to that, which will then potentially keep it down. So that's what I did. Again, all in place, real world. I used a 12-inch drill bit and just came in here and match drilled all 8 of these. So this is what happens. Again, the hinge is pinned, so it does not move. When you put clecos, when you match drill this to the hinge, when you put the clecos in, it pulls this main brace back tight against the flange. So you're bringing this main frame aft. So what does that do? It opens up this gap. It opens up the gap between the skins. And that's exactly what had happened to me with last time. I thought everything looked nice and good and tight, and as soon as I drilled those holes and put the clecos in it, it pulled that main frame aft, and since the skin is clecoed to the main frame, the skin came back with it. Now, it's basically nothing. It's actually, it automatically gives you that gap that Vans tells you to shim for. Remember at the beginning, not at the beginning, but early on, I said I was not going to purposely shim. And that's why, because this gap would even be bigger now. Right now, it might be, it's probably about a 32nd maybe. I'm not sure. But here's the thing. It's just clecoed. I haven't riveted anything. What I'm going to try next is exactly what I had talked about before. I'm going to put a very thin shim in between that frame and the ears of the hinges, the ones that we just match drilled, I'm going to put a little shim in there, which is going to move the frame forward in relation to the hinge flanges, those hinge ears that we just match drilled. It's going to move it forward, which will eliminate this gap. Now I know that you need to have a gap in here because when you go to open up the canopy, you don't want this skin getting caught on this skin or the structure underneath. I just want to see if that will in fact take care of the gap. At that point, I can either go with shims, without shims, or different shims in different locations, different thicknesses, whatever it is, to get a nice tight small seam but still be able to get the canopy open. As far as having this plane in line with this plane, it's better. It's as good as it's ever been. It's still not perfect. You can see there's a gap here, and you can see I can eliminate that very easily if I just push down a little bit on the skin. But it's minimal. And like I said, I'm thinking about potentially breaking the edge of this skin, breaking it down a little bit along this entire length, which will pretty much eliminate that. And the other thing that I had talked about doing was putting that diagonal bend in here on the skin, and I'll show you that on the frame. There's a diagonal bend on the frame itself, and I believe if you pre-bend the skin to match that, that will relieve some of the curve stresses that are in here, and it may lay down a little bit better. I believe when I went through this process the first time, when I started to put those bends in the skin in this area here, it made this fit nicer. So I'm done with that. I'm happy with that for now. I think what I'll move on to next is the bends, those diagonal bends. I'll fit it again, see how that looks. At that point, I will probably start to either drill some of these other holes, match drill these other holes, or I'll fit that splice plate that goes in here. I'll drill it and fit it in place. Not really sure. I think I'll do the bends first and then kind of see how it goes from there. But this is not horrible. This is a heck of a lot better. At this point, it's a lot better than it was the first time I had gone through it. And I'm not too concerned about the gap because one, it has to be there, and two, I'm not done yet. But this side actually looks better. There's no difference between this plane and this plane. The gap is a little bit wider, but it's smooth through here for the most part. It might be a little bit high, but gee whiz, I mean, I'm starting to split hairs at this point. But the fit all the way around is really nice. You can see here, the fit here, and then if you just follow that all the way across, it's really quite nice. Okay, let me get to bending some skin and talk to you later.